Well, I think it's about time to dig deep into some neo-prog. We haven't had a lot of neo-prog outfits this year, and yeah, you know me, I love some good neo-prog, so let's dive into it. Interference by Anubis. So Anubis is a neo-progressive rock outfit from Denmark. Even though they put out their first album, I believe, in 2004, these guys were playing, and jamming together since about the mid to late 80s. So, the usual kind of MO for a neo-prog group. Because one of the staples I feel for a neo-prog group is that they got their formation in the 80s, but they didn't actually put out any albums until like the 2000s. They actually got their start in the 80s and just kind of came up through there. Anyway, a little bit besides the point. This is their first album since 2020 Covered in Colors, which was a follow-up to their 2017 Covers in Black. And these two records are kind of a 1-2 punch of mainly covers, I believe all covers, but I could be wrong. Looking at some of their influences, and I had a lot of fun with these two records. Their usual MO is a little bit more of an accessible neo-prog that I'm feeling from bands like Frost and a lot of like John Mitchell's projects like Lonely Robot, It Bites, a little bit of Arena. But what I also feel like these guys are kind of channeling a little bit more of the modern side of things. Like I'm feeling a little bit of like the PROG project with their like Skyline album, for instance. That kind of more accessible, energetic essence and ebb and flow. But instead of it being a retro symphonic prog, we're looking at it more in a neo-prog sphere. And so you have a little bit more of the operetics, you have a little bit more concentration on that kind of singular synth and like mellotron sounds that neo-prog really, really loves to play with. And I've been having a ball with this one. I mean, I want to get my main criticism out of the gate right from the beginning so I can start to gush about this record. The main one is that this album is a little on the long side. It's an hour and 6 minutes, and I always feel like when an album reaches over an hour, there's got to be a main reason for it to be so long. And I just feel as though the runtime isn't really justified by some of these tracks. This album does have a number of filler tracks on it that I feel like they could have probably cut and not really lost a whole lot. Like if they had cut maybe anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes, we probably wouldn't have lost a whole lot. But that is my only major criticism of this album. Everything else about this album I really, really love. I love the music on here, even though there are times on here where I'm like, that actually feels a little bit like so-and-so, and that's just inherited with a lot of progressive rock. At least it doesn't do it to the extent that a lot of other bands have done this year. The only times when it's been, a little bit more apparent is for like the 6th track of Dissonance Cognizance, where it's really channeling the 90s and early 2000s King Crimson, where you have that kind of binaural beat, kind of call and answer guitar licks. Now, at least that's the kind of mode, that's the presentation of music that they then continue on with, because I mean this doesn't necessarily sound like a King Crimson track, even if it sounds like a King Crimson track, and it's really one of the only times like you can hear every once in a while you're like, okay, well that's more of like a early Steven Wilson track on tracks like Equations or The World of Clay, where it's feeling like Grace for Drowning or Insurgents, that kind of really deep, darker Steven Wilson stuff that didn't quite go too far into the prog. But what I really do appreciate is like the 1-2 punches of the longer stretches of tracks, those tracks that go into the 7 to 8 minute tracks like Ignorance is Bliss, Number Stations, the Intergalactic Dream of Stardom, and Interference, the title track. All of these tracks allow the band to really stretch their legs and jam a little bit more. And they're doing it in a more modern rock kind of stylings, the rock that we would get from say like the mid to late 2000s, but kind of surrounding themselves in this kind of neo-prog expression. So, we have the overlays of mellotrons, the overlay of synths with a very operatic voice that really kind of roots things home. Now, interplayed with all that, we have these quicker, more punchier tracks. Like my favorite track on this album is The Phoenix. That really does kind of root this track in a very catchy, hummable, very apparent chorus work that is immediately recognizable. You know, this is one that I kind of hum along to and sing along to, and it's one that I want to re-listen to after I've heard it a couple of times. You know, there's something about it that makes me want to come back for more. But like I said, there's just a little too much fat on here. Equations, The World of Clay, Abstinence, and even the first track of Emergence, I don't feel as though it adds a whole lot to the album. I don't feel like they're playing with the music in any new or fun way. Outside of what's already kind of found on this with some of the larger tracks, I feel like if they took some of those tracks and kind of smushed them together to create maybe about a 10 or 15 minute track, we would have gotten something really, really interesting. But I can't, you know, I'm talking about what's here and not what could be here. In the end, I had a lot of fun with this record. You know, this was one that I kept coming back to. There was something about it that I just loved. Very similar, I already mentioned, of the Baroque project with Skyline, where there was something that just kept me coming back to. And a lot of that is the very catchy, very fun chorus work in and around and intermixed with this prog expression that I feel like, you know, when some bands are trying to mix prog and more modern music, it kind of ends up either being too accessible and not enough prog, or it's too crazy and too inaccessible, but not enough like kind of radio-friendly atmosphere. And so I feel like this does really thread the needle between the two, and I had a great time with it. This is the kind of progressive rock album that I would showcase to somebody who was kind of on the fence for it. You know, like not quite sure if they were ready for prog, not quite ready for it. This would be like a really nice crossover to kind of, you know, extend the arm, so to speak, for them to come on over. Yeah, had a great time with this one. I think you guys should really check it out, and I will say Interference by Anubis Gate is one that I would absolutely download. This is one to have on your computer. This is one to come back to. I know I'm going to be listening to it quite heavily throughout the summer, if I can find time for repeated listens. But no, I had a great time with it. I highly recommend it. If you are a fan of more modern prog, if you're a fan of neo-prog, you're going to find something to like about this album. I wouldn't necessarily say it blow down the doors, rejuvenized, reinvented the genre, but it plays very, very well in the sandbox that it constructs. So there you go. That's my thought of Anubis Gate's Interference. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I got for you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.